Lonely widow romance scam story. The sound of silence, the humming of the refrigerator was the loudest sound in Eleanor Vance's world. It was a persistent, low drone that seemed to emanate from the very walls of her two-bedroom bungalow, a modest house with dusty pink stucco and a gravel driveway, nestled in a quiet suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. The refrigerator lived in a kitchen that hadn't been updated since 1987, with harvest gold appliances and linoleum. Curling at the edges near the back door, Arthur had always talked about remodeling next year, Ellie, when I get that bonus, but next year never came, and now the harvest gold remained, a monument to postponed dreams. At 74, Eleanor had become an expert in silence. She knew the way the floorboards creaked at 3 in the afternoon from the sun's heat pressing through the crawl space. She knew which windows rattled when the desert wind kicked up, usually around 4:30, just as she was thinking about making dinner. She knew the specific tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, a wedding present from 52 years ago, shipped all the way from her mother's house in Ohio that sounded like a heartbeat. That heartbeat had been the only one she'd listened to for the past 4 years. Arthur had been pruning his beloved rose bushes. It was a Sunday in early April, the kind of perfect spring morning that made Arizona bearable, cool enough for a sweater, with a sky so blue it hurt to look at. He'd gone outside after breakfast, cup of coffee in hand, secateurs in the other. She'd been washing dishes, watching him through the window above the sink. He'd waved at her, and she'd waved back. A small, ordinary moment, the last ordinary moment. She'd turned away to rinse a plate, and when she looked back, he was on the ground, just crumpled. Like someone had pulled a plug and he'd simply folded into the soft desert soil, secateurs still in his hand, his body making a shape in the rose bed that seemed too small for a man who had always filled every room he entered. The paramedics said it was a massive coronary. Instant, they told her. He wouldn't have felt a thing. She didn't know if that was meant to comfort her or if they just said that to everyone. It didn't comfort her. She would have wanted him to feel something, to have a moment to think of her, to reach for her, to say goodbye in whatever silent way people say goodbye when death comes sudden as a heart attack on a Sunday morning in April. The world had ended, and then it had just continued, muted, in black and white. People brought casseroles for weeks. The freezer was full of them, lasagnas and tuna bakes and something mysterious with cream of mushroom soup that she eventually threw away, unidentifiable and freezer burned. Her bridge club sent flowers. The ladies from church came by, sat in her living room, patted her hand, and spoke in hushed voices about God's plan. Eleanor nodded along, made them tea, thanked them for coming, and felt nothing at all. Her son, Mark, had been wonderful at the funeral. Solid, strong, a pillar in his dark suit, holding her elbow as they walked to the graveside, his face set in that particular expression men wear when they're trying not to cry. He gave a eulogy that made people laugh and cry in equal measure, full of stories about Arthur teaching him to fish, Arthur coaching his little league team, Arthur showing up at every school play and piano recital with a camcorder balanced on his shoulder. But Mark lived in Seattle, a world away in both miles and spirit. He was a project manager for a tech firm, a world of agile sprints and deliverables and Zoom calls that Eleanor couldn't even begin to picture. His wife, Chloe, was a nice girl, though Eleanor felt they spoke a different language. Chloe was an architect, all clean lines and minimalist aesthetics, and Eleanor could see her eyes wandering when she visited the bungalow, cataloging all the things she would change if it were hers. The clutter, the harvest gold, the rose-patterned wallpaper in the half-bath that Arthur had loved because it reminded him of his mother's house. Their lives were a blur of farmers' markets, microbreweries, and hiking trails. They sent photos of themselves on mountaintops, red-faced and windblown, holding hiking poles. Eleanor would look at these photos and try to feel something pride, maybe, or happiness that they were living such full lives, but mostly she just felt tired. So profoundly, deeply tired, they called every Sunday for a stilted 15 minutes. The calls came at exactly 4:00 p.m. her time, like clockwork. She would settle into Arthur's armchair. She never sat in it except for these calls and wait for the phone to ring. "Hi, Mom, how are you?" "Oh, fine, dear. Hot here. How's Seattle?" Wet. A pause. "We went hiking yesterday. Got some amazing photos of Mount Rainier." "That's nice, dear. Chloe got a promotion. She's now leading the downtown library renovation project." "Oh, how wonderful. Tell her congratulations." "I will. How's the garden?" It's there." Another pause. She could hear the silence stretching between them across all those miles, and she knew he was searching for something else to say, some topic that would fill the remaining 12 minutes. Sometimes he talked about the puppy they'd adopted, a golden retriever named Juno who sounded like she got more attention than Eleanor did. Sometimes he talked about a new restaurant they'd tried. Sometimes he just let the silence hang there, uncomfortable and heavy, until one of them manufactured a reason to end the call. "Mark, when do you think you might visit?" The question hung in the air. She knew she shouldn't ask. It put him on the spot, made him defensive, but she couldn't help herself. "We'll try for Christmas, Mom. Things are just really busy right now." Christmas came and went. Sometimes he came, sometimes he didn't. He'd visited maybe once every 2 or 3 years since moving to Seattle, a long weekend that felt more like an obligation than a homecoming. He'd walk through the house, a polite stranger, commenting on how nothing had changed, and Eleanor would feel the crushing weight of his absence even while he was there. He was present but not present. His body occupied space on her couch, but his mind was elsewhere, on work emails, on the hiking trip he was missing, on the life he'd built far away from her. After he left, the silence was always worse. It had been briefly disturbed, like a still pond disturbed by a stone, and now the ripples had settled and the water was still again, but somehow emptier than before. The days bled into one another. Mornings were for a weak cup of tea. Arthur had always made the coffee, and she'd never learned, and now it seemed too late to start and the Today Show. She watched the same commercials day after day, knew the jingles by heart, felt a strange kinship with the people on screen who seemed to live such vibrant, purposeful lives. Afternoons were for a novel she couldn't concentrate on, or staring at the garden Arthur had left behind, now a wild tangle of weeds and dry, grasping twigs. The roses had died first, deprived of his careful attention. Then the vegetables he'd planted every spring, tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, had been overtaken by weeds. Now it was just chaos, a living monument to neglect. Sometimes she would stand at the kitchen window and look at that garden and try to remember the last time she'd felt truly alive, truly connected to something, truly necessary to anyone. The answer was always the same: April, 4 years ago, before Arthur collapsed into the roses. Evenings were the worst, the long, slow descent into night, with only the flickering blue light of the television for company. She would watch whatever was on: game shows, reruns of shows she'd seen a dozen times, infomercials for products she didn't need just for the sound of human voices. The refrigerator hummed, the grandfather clock ticked, the television murmured, and Eleanor sat in the dark, a small woman in a large armchair, waiting for bedtime, waiting for morning, waiting for something she couldn't name. She had friends, or had once had friends, but Arthur's death had changed things. Couples she and Arthur had socialized with for decades didn't know what to do with a widow. Invitations dried up. Dinner parties for 6 became awkward when you had 5. Bridge club continued, but she felt like a fifth wheel, the odd woman out in a world of pairs. She stopped going. They stopped calling. It was easier that way for everyone. The loneliness was a physical ache. It sat in her chest, a cold, hard stone that never quite dissolved, no matter how many cups of tea she drank or how many hours of television she watched. She had read somewhere that loneliness was as damaging to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Some days she could feel it damaging her, cell by cell, wearing her down from the inside. Sometimes she would talk to Arthur out loud in the empty house. She would tell him about her day, about something funny she'd seen on television, about the neighbor's cat that kept getting into the yard. She would imagine his responses, the dry wit, the gentle teasing, the way he'd reach over and pat her hand, and then she would remember again that he wasn't there, and the silence would rush back in deeper than before. The world outside her door continued, indifferent to her existence. Neighbors came and went. Children grew up and moved away. Seasons changed, though in Arizona the changes were subtle: slightly cooler, then slightly hotter, then slightly cooler again. The years stacked up behind her like plates in a cupboard, indistinguishable and unremarkable. She was 74 years old. She had outlived her husband, outlived most of her close friends, outlived her usefulness as a mother and a wife and a member of any community that mattered. She realized one evening as she sat watching the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of orange and pink, entirely and completely alone. The refrigerator hummed on, the loudest sound in the world, and Eleanor Vance, a small woman in a large armchair, waited for something to change. She didn't know what. She didn't know how. She only knew that she couldn't go on like this forever, suspended in silence, slowly disappearing into the harvest gold and the curling linoleum. And the garden of weeds, something had to give. She just never imagined it would be her heart, a glimmer in the dark. It was a Tuesday in late September when Eleanor discovered the chat room. Not that Tuesdays mattered anymore, they all blended together, a colorless procession of identical days, but something about the quality of the light that afternoon had made her restless. The desert sun was beginning its slow autumn shift, casting longer shadows across her living room floor, and she found herself unable to settle into her usual routine. She had eaten her customary dinner, a lean cuisine she'd microwaved in the Harvest Gold kitchen, eaten off a tray table in front of the television, and was now scrolling aimlessly through a news website on her laptop. The laptop was a relic, a bulky Dell that Mark had given her 5 years ago. "So you can email me, Mom," she'd learned. to use it well enough, though her fingers were stiff with arthritis and she still sometimes hit two keys at once. The email never really caught on. Mark was too busy to write and she never knew what to say. The news website was full of the usual things: politics she didn't understand anymore, celebrity gossip that seemed trivial, stories about wars and disasters in places she couldn't locate on a map. She scrolled without reading, just watching the words and images flicker past, a digital version of the television static that filled her evenings, and then a pop-up appeared. It was a small rectangle in the corner of her screen, decorated with pastel colors and smiling cartoon seniors. Silver Soulmates, the headline read, "Find companionship after 50. Join free today." Eleanor's first instinct was to click the X and make it go away. She didn't know much about the internet, but she knew pop-ups were annoying, possibly dangerous, the digital equivalent of telemarketers calling during dinner. Her finger hovered over the trackpad, ready to banish it, but something stopped her. Companionship, the word sat in her mind, heavy and warm. When was the last time someone had simply kept her company? Really kept her company, not just exchanged pleasantries with. The ladies at church meant well, but their visits were brief, dutiful. Mark's Sunday calls were a countdown to the moment one of them could reasonably hang up. Even the checkout clerks at the grocery store, with their mechanical "have a nice day," seemed to be looking through her rather than at her. She thought about Arthur, about the way they used to sit in this very room, him in his armchair, her on the couch, reading their separate books, but occasionally looking up to share a thought, a comment, a smile. Just being in the same space, breathing the same air, had been enough. Companionship didn't have to be grand gestures and passionate conversations. Sometimes it was just the quiet knowledge that you weren't alone. She didn't click the X instead, she clicked the pop-up. The website loaded slowly. Her internet connection was basic at best, but eventually the Silver Soulmates homepage appeared, all soft focus photographs of silver-haired couples holding hands on beaches and laughing over coffee cups. There were testimonials from women named Barbara and men named Richard, all claiming to have found love. When I least expected it and after I'd given up hope. Eleanor felt a flush of embarrassment just looking at it. This was for other people, surely. People who still had something to offer. People who weren't 74 and arthritic and carrying 50 extra pounds and a lifetime of grief. People who didn't spend their evenings watching reruns of Murder, She Wrote, and talking to dead husbands. But her cursor hovered over the Create Profile button. What harm could it do? She didn't have to actually meet anyone. She could just look, see who was out there, see if anyone might possibly be interested in a woman like her. The anonymity of it felt safe. She could be anyone online, or at least a better version of herself. She clicked the button. The form was simple enough. Username, she typed Desertros47, thinking of Arthur's garden. Age 74, she typed honestly, though her finger hesitated over the numbers. Location, Phoenix. As relationship status, widowed. Looking for friendship, maybe romance. She checked both boxes, her heart beating faster than it had in months. The profile picture was the hardest part. She didn't have many recent photos of herself who would take them. So she scrolled through old files on her computer until she found one from about 10 years ago. She was at a restaurant with Arthur, celebrating their 42nd anniversary. She was wearing a blue blouse that brought out her eyes, and her hair was still more brown than gray, and she was smiling, genuinely smiling, because Arthur had just told a joke and she was mid-laugh. It wasn't dishonest, she told herself. It was just aspirational, a reminder of who she used to be, who she might still be underneath all the years and the grief. She uploaded the photo, typed a brief description: widow seeking conversation and connection. Enjoy reading, gardening though my garden needs work, and quiet evenings, and clicked submit. The screen flashed a confirmation. Welcome to Silver Soulmates, Desert Rose 47. Start browsing matches today. Eleanor closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, her heart pounding. She felt like she'd done something illicit, something slightly shameful. But underneath the shame was something else, something she hadn't felt in years: anticipation. The next few days passed in their usual blur of tea and television and staring at the garden, but now there was an undercurrent of something new. Every few hours, she would open the laptop and check her Silver Soulmates inbox. Nothing, then nothing again, then still nothing. She told herself she didn't care. It was silly, this whole idea. A woman her age, looking for love on the internet. What would Arthur think? What would Mark think? She could imagine Chloe's carefully neutral expression, the way she'd say "that's nice," Eleanor, in that tone that meant the exact opposite. But she kept checking. On the fourth day, a notification appeared. One new message. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The sender's username was Kajanhart88. The message was short, just a few lines, but she read them 3 times, then a fourth, then a fifth. Hey there, darlin'. Saw your profile. You have kind eyes. The kind a man could get lost in. Name's Bo. Mind if I say hello? Eleanor stared at the screen. Kind eyes. When was the last time anyone had complimented her eyes? Arthur used to all the time. Eyes like summer sky, he'd say, and she'd roll her own eyes but secretly love it. But that was years ago. Decades, maybe. She typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that one too. Finally, she settled on something simple, hoping it didn't sound too eager or too old or too anything. Hello. Bo, thank you for your kind message. I'm Eleanor. It's nice to meet you. She hit send before she could change her mind. His response came within the hour. Eleanor, that's a beautiful name. Classy, elegant, suits you, I bet. She found herself smiling at the screen, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. When was the last time she'd done that? Tell me about yourself, Eleanor. What do you do for fun out there in the desert? She thought about her answer carefully. What did she do for fun? The question felt foreign, like being asked to describe a country she'd visited long ago and barely remembered. She used to have fun dinner parties with friends, weekend trips to Sedona, dancing with Arthur in the living room to old Sinatra records. Now? Not much, she typed honestly. I read, watched television. Sometimes I try to work in the garden, but it's gotten away from me since my husband passed. She almost deleted the last part, too much too soon, but before she could, he responded, I'm sorry about your husband. That's a hard road to walk. My mama always said grief is just love with nowhere to go. Sounds like you had a lot of love. Tears pricked at Eleanor's eyes. That was exactly it. Exactly what she'd been feeling for 4 years but couldn't put into words. Love with nowhere to go, overflowing love with no one to receive it. Thank you, she typed. That's beautiful. Your mama sounds wise. She was. Lost her 3 years ago. Cancer. Hardest thing I ever went through, and I work on an oil rig. An oil rig. So that was what Cajun Heart meant. He was from Louisiana, working out in the Gulf of Mexico. She pictured him on a platform surrounded by water, the vast, empty ocean stretching in every direction. She knew something about vast empty spaces. That must be lonely, she wrote. Loneliest job in the world, darlin'. Nothing but water and sky and the same faces day after day. Nights are the worst. Just me and the stars and the sound of the waves. Sometimes I think I'll go crazy from the quiet. Eleanor read those words and felt something shift in her chest. She knew that quiet. She lived in that quiet. Here was someone who understood. I know what you mean, she typed. The quiet can be deafening. His response came quickly. Maybe we can be quiet together, sometimes across the miles. Two lonely souls keeping each other company. It was such a simple offer, such a small thing, but to Eleanor, sitting alone in her dark living room with only the refrigerator for company, it felt like a lifeline. I'd like that, she typed. I'd like that very much. Over the next week, they messaged constantly. Eleanor found herself waking earlier, rushing through her morning tea, so she could open the laptop and see if he'd written overnight. He usually had long, rambling messages sent in the small hours of his night shift, full of observations about the stars and the sea and the roughnecks he worked with. He told her about growing up in a small town in Louisiana, the youngest of 4 boys, his daddy a fisherman, his mama a school teacher. He told her about joining the rig crews at 19, working his way up from grunt work to engineer, the pride he felt in keeping the massive machines running. He told her about the hurricanes he'd weathered, the close calls, the men he'd lost to accidents and the sea. She told him about Ohio, where she'd grown up the only child of older parents, the long winters, the spring thaws. She told him about meeting Arthur at a diner in 1968, him in his army uniform home on leave, her working the counter to save for college. She told him about the wedding, the birth of Mark, the ordinary beautiful. Years of raising a family and building a life. She told him about Arthur's death, the roses, the paramedics, the way the world had kept turning even though hers had stopped. He listened. He really listened. He asked questions, not the polite, perfunctory questions people asked to fill space, but real questions that showed he'd actually read and thought about what she'd said. What was Arthur's favorite thing about you? He asked one night. She had to think about that. What was Arthur's favorite thing about her? They'd been married so long, the answer seemed both obvious and impossible to articulate. He said I made him feel safe, she finally wrote. Like no matter what happened out in the world, he could come home and everything would be okay. That's a beautiful thing to give someone, Bo replied. Safety, peace, a place to land. Not many people can do that. What about you? She asked. What do you want in a partner? His answer came slowly, as if he was typing and deleting, thinking carefully. Someone who sees me, not the job, not the paycheck, not the tough guy act, just me, the scared little boy underneath who's still afraid of the dark and just wants someone to hold on to. Eleanor read those words and felt her heart crack open just a little. She knew that feeling. She'd spent for years being unseen. She knew exactly what it felt like to want someone to just see you. I see you, Beau, she typed. I think I do, and I see you, Eleanor, the real you, the one hiding behind the grief and the loneliness. She's still in there, I can tell. She closed the laptop and cried then, not sad tears exactly, but something else. Relief maybe, or hope. She'd thought hope was something she'd lost forever, something that had died with Arthur in the rose garden. But here it was, flickering back to life in the most unexpected place, a chat room for seniors, a stranger on an oil rig, a man with kind words and a Cajun heart. They moved from the Silver Soulmates platform to a private messaging app after the first week. Beau suggested it easier to chat, more private, and Eleanor agreed without hesitation. She didn't question why they needed more privacy. She was just grateful for the ease of it, the way his messages now popped up directly on her phone, a little notification that made her heart leap every time. He sent her more photos, himself on the rig deck at sunset, the sky on fire behind him, himself in the mess hall, grinning with a group of roughnecks, all of them covered in grease and grinning, himself in his bunk, shirtless, the muscles of his chest and shoulders visible even in the dim light. She saved them all to her phone, looked at them when she was feeling low, this handsome young man because he was young. She knew that now, 37 years old, was interested in her, talking to her, making her feel alive again. She didn't send photos of herself at first. She was too embarrassed, too aware of the decades between them, the miles of skin and life and loss that separated her from the woman in the blue blouse on her profile. But he asked, gently at first, then more directly, I want to see you, Eleanor, the real you, not the old photo, you. She deflected, made excuses. But he persisted, and his persistence felt like flattery rather than pressure. You're beautiful, I can tell. Beauty doesn't fade, darlin', it just changes. I want to see how you've changed. I want to see the woman I'm falling for. Falling for, the words stopped her cold. Was that what was happening? Was she falling for him? Was he falling for her? She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror that night, really looked, maybe for the first time in years. Gray hair, thin and wispy now, deep lines around her eyes and mouth, age spots on her cheeks, skin that sagged where it used to be firm. She was 74, he was 37. It was ridiculous, impossible. But when she looked closer, she could still see it, the ghost of the woman she'd been, the woman with the kind eyes, the woman who'd made Arthur feel safe, the woman who still had love with nowhere to go. She took a photo, not a nude, just a simple selfie in the bathroom light, no filters, no angles, no pretending, just her face. As it was right now, she sent it with trembling fingers. His response came immediately. There she is, there's my Eleanor, beautiful. She believed him. She wanted to believe him. And wanting, she had learned, was a powerful thing. Powerful enough to make the impossible seem possible. Powerful enough to make a 74-year-old woman feel like a girl again, blushing at a compliment from a handsome young man half a country away. The refrigerator hummed on in the background. The grandfather clock ticked. But for the first time in 4 years, Eleanor Vance didn't hear them. She was too busy listening to her heart beat, the voice in the machine. October arrived in Phoenix with a subtle shift in the air, still warm, still dry, but with mornings that carried a hint of coolness, a promise of the mild winter to come. Eleanor noticed it now, the changing of seasons, whereas before she had let them pass and remarked. She noticed many things these days, the angle of the sunlight on her kitchen floor, the way the birds gathered at the empty feeder Arthur had once kept filled, the sound of her own laughter when she caught herself mid-chuckle at something Beau had written. Because she laughed now, genuinely, unexpectedly laughed. His messages had become the architecture of her days. She woke each morning to find one waiting, sometimes sent in the dark hours before dawn, sometimes time stomped well past midnight, proof that he worked through the night while she slept. She would make her tea, weak and milky as always, and settle into Arthur's armchair with her phone, reading his words slowly, savoring them like the good chocolates she saved for special occasions. Mornin', sunshine, another night out here on this hunk of metal. Waves are high today, storm moving through the Gulf. The rig's swaying just enough to keep you on your toes. Made me think of you, how you're probably swaying too in your own way, through your own storms. Keep standing, darlin', I'm standing with you, she would read. Such messages 3 or 4 times, marveling at how this man, this stranger, could articulate feelings she'd barely acknowledged to herself. He had a way with words, a poetic bent that seemed at odds with his rough profession. When she mentioned this, he laughed. Honey, when you spend weeks at sea with nothing but your thoughts, you either go crazy or you learn to put words to things. I chose words, cheaper than therapy. She found herself telling him things she'd never told anyone, not just the broad strokes of her life with Arthur, but the small moments, the secret shames, the quiet regrets. Sometimes I was mean to him, she confessed one afternoon. Nothing big, just little things, snapping at him for leaving his shoes in the living room, rolling my eyes when he told the same story for the 100th time. And now I'd give anything to have him leave his shoes out one more time, to hear that story again. It's the little things you miss most, isn't it? The annoying things, the ordinary things, the things you didn't know you were going to lose. Beau's response came quickly, as it always did. Regret's a heavy load, Eleanor. I carry some myself. My mama, before she passed, I was out on the rig when she went into the hospital. Couldn't get back in time. She died alone, Eleanor. Her youngest boy, the one she dotted on, wasn't there to hold her hand. I think about that every single day. The should-haves and could-haves. They'll eat you alive if you let them. She cried for him then, for his loss and hers, for all the should-haves and could-haves that haunted both their lives. It felt strange to cry for someone she'd never met, but it also felt natural, right? He was becoming real to her, more real than the neighbors she saw occasionally from her window, more real than the ladies at church. Who'd stopped calling? What do you do? She asked, with the regret. I mean, how do you keep going? I remember what my daddy told me once. He said, son, regret is just hindsight with a guilty conscience. You didn't know then what you know now. Forgive yourself for not knowing. So I try. Every day I try to forgive myself, and I try to live in a way that would make her proud. That's all any of us can do, I reckon. Forgive yourself. Live in a way that would make them proud. Eleanor turned these words over in her mind like smooth stones, feeling their weight and texture. Could she forgive herself for the rolled eyes, the snapped words, the 1,000 small cruelties that accumulated over 52 years of marriage? Could she live in a way that would make Arthur proud? She didn't know, but for the first time she wanted to try. Their conversations deepened as October progressed. They ranged across topics both trivial and profound: his favorite gumbo recipe, her mother's tips for perfect pie crust, the politics of rig life, the challenges of growing old alone. He asked about Mark, about her strained relationship with her only son, and listened without judgment. As she tried to explain, he's a good boy, she insisted, a good man, he has his own life, his own family. I'm not part of it the way I used to be. That's natural, I guess, Beau replied. Kids grow up, they leave, it's what we raise them to do, but that doesn't make it hurt less, does it? No, it doesn't. Have you told him how you feel? The question gave her pause. Told him? Told Mark that she was lonely, that his 15-minute Sunday calls left her emptier than before, that she sometimes went days without speaking to another human being. The idea was unthinkable. He'd feel guilty. He'd call more often out of obligation, not love, and that would be worse. I can't, she wrote. He wouldn't understand. Maybe not, but maybe he would. You never know, Eleanor. People surprise you. She doubted it. Mark had never been one for emotional conversations. He got that from Arthur, who could show love in 1,000 ways but rarely spoke it. But she appreciated Beau's gentle encouragement, his belief that she deserved better than she was getting. You deserve to be cherished, he told her one night. You deserve someone who sees you, really sees you every single day, not just on Sundays when it's convenient. The words wrapped around her like a blanket. When was the last time anyone had talked about what she deserved? She'd spent for years accepting what she got, the scraps of attention, the crumbs of connection, and telling herself it was enough. Beau made her wonder if maybe it wasn't. One evening in mid-October, his messages took a more intimate turn. They'd been talking about loneliness, about the particular ache of sleeping alone after decades of sharing a bed. Eleanor had admitted that she still slept on her side of the mattress, still left Arthur's pillow in place, still sometimes reached for him in the night and woke to emptiness. I do the same thing, Beau wrote, my bunks. Narrow, meant for one, but sometimes I wake up and for a split second I think someone's there. Then I remember I'm alone. Out here alone is all there is. It's different for you, she replied. You're young, you have time, you'll find someone. Maybe, but I've found someone now, someone who understands me, someone who makes me feel less alone. You, Eleanor, you do that for me. Her heart stuttered. She stared at the words, reading them over and over, trying to absorb their meaning. I'm 74 years old, she typed finally. You're 37. That's not how these things work. Who decides how things work? Some rulebook I haven't read? I know what I feel, Eleanor. I know that when I talk to you, the world feels less cold. I know that your messages are the first thing I look for when I finish my shift. I know that I think about you constantly, your kindness, your wisdom, the way you see the beauty in small things. Age is just a number. Connection is what matters. She didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity, to dismiss his words as the fantasy of a lonely man with too much time at sea. But another part, a deeper part, a part she'd thought long dead, wanted to believe, wanted to be desired, wanted to feel, just once more, like a woman instead of a widow. I don't Know what to say, she admitted. Then don't say anything. Just think about it. Think about us. About what could be possible if we let it. She thought about it. Lord, how she thought about it. She thought about it while washing her dishes, while watching television, while lying in bed staring at the ceiling. She thought about his hands, strong, capable hands that kept massive machines running, and imagined them touching her face. She thought about his voice, which she'd never actually heard, and imagined it whispering her name. She thought about the possibility of being wanted, truly wanted, by someone who still had his whole life ahead of him. It was ridiculous, impossible, and yet the photos began after that. Not immediately. There was a shyness on both sides, a tentative dance around the edges of intimacy, but gradually, inevitably, the barriers fell. He sent the first one, a selfie taken in his bunk, the lighting soft, his expression vulnerable. He was shirtless again, but this time it felt different, less like showing off, more like offering, like saying, "Here I am, all of me, see me." She looked at it for a long time, her finger hovering over the delete button, but she didn't delete. She saved it instead, adding it to the growing collection in a password-protected folder on her phone. "You're beautiful," she wrote, and meant it. He was rugged and real and alive in a way that made her feel alive too. "Now you," he replied. "I want to see you, Eleanor, all of you, the woman I'm falling for." Falling for, there it was again. She should have been alarmed, should have pulled back, insisted on boundaries, reminded him of the impossibility of their situation. Instead, she felt a warmth spread through her chest, a loosening of something tight and guarded. She took the photo in her bedroom late at night with only the bedside lamp for illumination. She posed as she had for Arthur decades ago, when her body was firmer and her future stretched ahead like an open road. Now her body bore the marks of time, wrinkles and sags and spots, but in the soft light, with the right angle, she could almost see the ghost of her younger self. She sent it before she could lose her nerve. His response came within minutes. "Eleanor, my God, you take my breath away." She didn't know if he meant it. She didn't know if any of this was real. But in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was the feeling, the intoxicating, terrifying, glorious feeling of being seen, of being desired, of being, for the first time in 4 years, truly alive. The exchanges continued, each one bolder than the last. He sent photos of himself in various states of undress, always tasteful, always accompanied by words that made her blush like a schoolgirl. She sent photos in return, learning to angle the camera, to find the light, to see herself through his eyes. "You're so responsive," he wrote one night, "so willing to trust me. It makes me want to take care of you, to protect you, to give you everything you've been missing." "What have I been missing?" she asked, passion, excitement. "Someone who can't wait to talk to you, someone who thinks about you constantly, someone who would cross oceans just to hold your hand. Would you? Cross oceans? For you, Eleanor?" "In a heartbeat. Soon as this contract ends, I'm coming to you, I promise." The promise was a seed planted in fertile soil. She watered it with hope, fed it with imagination, watched it grow into something she could almost touch. He would come, he would hold her, he would make good on all his beautiful words. She started planning, imagining where she would take him in Phoenix, the Desert Botanical Garden, the Heard Museum, the view from South Mountain at sunset, imagining introducing him to her life, her world, her small existence, imagining what it would feel like to walk down the street with a handsome young man on her arm, to see the looks of surprise and envy, to feel young again by association. She even bought the dress, a floral print from a catalog, size 14, in shades of blue that brought out her eyes. She ordered it online, a minor miracle of modern technology that Beau had taught her, and when it arrived, she tried it on in front of the bedroom mirror, turning this way and that, imagining his reaction when he saw her in it. Soon, he promised. Soon, darlin', just a few more weeks. She believed him. She believed everything. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and Eleanor Vance, 74 years old and twice a fool, fell deeper in love with a ghost than she'd ever fallen with a man of flesh and blood. She just didn't know he was a ghost yet, not yet, falling. November came to Phoenix like a sigh of relief. The brutal summer was finally a memory, replaced by days of perfect blue skies and temperatures that made it possible to sit outside again. Eleanor found herself opening windows she'd kept sealed for months, letting the desert air flow through her stuffy bungalow, carrying with it the faint scent of creosote from the mountains. She spent more time in the garden now, not working in it, it was too far gone for that, a wilderness of weeds and dead things, but sitting on the cracked concrete patio, a cup of tea in her hands, her phone never far from reach, she would watch the lizards skitter across the warm stones and wait for the notification that meant Beau was awake, was thinking of her, was reaching out across the miles to touch her. The notifications came frequently now, several times a day, sometimes more. He wrote from the rig during his breaks, from his bunk in the quiet hours, from the mess hall when his shift was done. His messages were like oxygen, and she was a woman who hadn't realized she'd been suffocating. "Mornin', beautiful, dreamt of you last night. We were walking through a garden, not desert, but green, like back home in Louisiana. You were wearing a white dress and your hair was loose and you kept looking at me with those eyes. Lord, those eyes, woke up reaching for you." She would read such messages and feel a physical warmth spread through her body, a tingling that started in her chest and radiated outward. At night, alone in her bed, she would close her eyes and imagine his voice still unheard, but she'd constructed a version of it in her mind, deep and slow and laced with that Cajun cadence he described, whispering to her in the dark. "Tell me about your day," he would say, and she would. She told him about the neighbor's cat that had taken to visiting her patio, a scruffy orange tom with a tournier who accepted her offerings of canned tuna with regal indifference. She told him about the book she was reading, a mystery set in Maine that made her shiver with remembered cold. She told him about the memory that had surfaced that morning of Arthur teaching Mark to ride a bike in this very driveway, Mark wobbling and falling, Arthur running to pick him up, both of them laughing. "You're a storyteller, Eleanor," Bo said. "You make me see everything, feel everything. I swear I was right there with you, watching that little boy learn to ride." "He's 47 now," she replied. 47 years old, and I still see him as that little boy with scraped knees. That's love, seeing someone as they were and as they are all at once. You're good at that." She was good at it. She'd had decades of practice with Arthur, with Mark, with herself. But Bo made her feel like her particular kind of seeing was a gift, not just a habit. He made her feel special. The intimacy between them deepened with each passing day. What had started as flirtation became something more, a connection that felt, to Eleanor, almost spiritual. They finished each other's sentences now, or at least each other's thoughts. He would start a message and she would know somehow where it was going. She would share an observation and he would respond with an echo of her own thinking. "It's like we're the same person sometimes," she wrote one evening. "Not the same," he corrected gently. "Two halves of the same whole, two puzzle pieces that finally found each other." She loved that image, two puzzle pieces, separated by miles and years and circumstance, finally clicking into place. It made the impossible seem possible. It made the ridiculous seem romantic. He started calling her baby in his messages, not darlin' or sugar or beautiful, though he used those two, baby. It was such a small word, such a common endearment, but coming from him it felt different. Felt like a claim, a promise, a future. "Good night, baby. Sleep warm. Dream of me." She did. She dreamed of him constantly, now vivid, technicolor dreams that left her flushed and disoriented upon waking. In her dreams, he had a face, a voice, a body she could touch. He held her in ways Arthur hadn't held her in years, passionate and urgent and young. She would wake from these dreams and lie still, her heart pounding, reaching for the phone to see if he'd written. He always had. One night, their conversation took a turn that left Eleanor breathless. They'd been talking about loneliness, their endless, inexhaustible topic, and Bo had grown philosophical. "You know what I miss most?" He wrote. "Not sex. I mean, yeah, that too. But more than that, I miss touch. Simple touch, a hand on my shoulder, an arm around my waist, someone playing with my hair while I fall asleep. You can't survive without touch, Eleanor. It's like water, like air." She knew exactly what he meant. She missed Arthur's hand in hers during movies. Missed his arm draped across her in bed. Missed the casual brushes in the kitchen, the hallway, the garden. Missed being touched like she mattered, like her body was still worthy of attention. "I know," she wrote. "Sometimes I think I'd give anything just to be held again." Anything? The question hung in the digital space between them. She considered it, really considered it. What would she give? Her savings? Her dignity? Her carefully constructed walls? "Yes," she wrote, "anything." His response came slowly, as if he was choosing each word with care. "What if I told you I could give you that? Not just words, Eleanor, not just promises, real touch, real holding, real, actual, in the flesh me. I'd say you're on an oil rig in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. For now, but contracts end, baby, and when this one does, I'm free. I could come to you, I could hold you, I could give you everything you've been missing." She stared at the screen, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Was this really happening? "You mean visit?" She typed, her fingers clumsy with emotion. "Come see me?" "I mean more than visit. I mean be with you. See where this goes. See if what we feel online is real in person. I think it is. I think it's more real than anything I've felt in years." Eleanor set the phone down and walked to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water, drank it slowly, stared out the window at the dark garden. Then she walked back to the living room, picked up the phone and read his words again. "I think it's more real than anything I've felt in years." She thought about Arthur, about the comfortable, familiar love they'd shared, about the way it had felt to be known by someone for so long that you forgot where you ended and they began. She'd thought that was the only kind of love there was the slow accretion of shared history, the gradual erosion of separateness. But this lightning strike? This recognition across the void? This was something else entirely. This was the stuff of romance novels, of movies she'd scoffed at, of dreams she'd stopped dreaming decades ago. When? She wrote, "When does your contract end?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. Depends on the weather, on the repairs, on 100 things I can't control. But soon, baby, soon, 3 weeks. She could survive 3 weeks. She could plan, prepare, transform herself and her home into something worthy of his arrival. "I'll be here," she wrote, "waiting. I know you will. That's what I love about you, Eleanor. Your steadiness, your patience. You're like the desert, harsh and beautiful and eternal. I can't wait to get my hands on you." Love. He'd used the word love, not lightly, not casually, but as part of a sentence about what he loved about her. Eleanor read it 10 times, 20 times, each reading imprinting it deeper on her heart. "I love you too," she wrote, and meant it. The days that followed were the happiest Eleanor had known since Arthur's death. She moved through them in a kind of daze, her body going through the motions while her mind lived entirely in the world she and Beau were building together. She cleaned the bungalow from top to bottom, scrubbing corners that hadn't seen attention in years. Washing curtains, polishing silver, she bought new sheets, soft, high-thread count sheets in a shade of cream that felt romantic and made up the guest room as if expecting a king. But she didn't put him in the guest room. She knew without quite admitting it to herself that he would sleep in her bed, in Arthur's bed. The thought should have bothered her more than it did. She also thought about what she would wear when he arrived, the floral dress, certainly for their first meeting. But after that, she went through her closet, assessing each item with new eyes. Too old, too frumpy, too reminiscent of the widow she'd been. She needed to be the woman he saw online, the woman with kind eyes and a body still capable of desire. On an impulse, she ordered some new things from the catalog: a silky nightgown in deep burgundy, a blouse with a lower neckline than she'd worn in years, a skirt that fell just below the knee, swishy and feminine. When they arrived, she tried them on in front of the mirror, turning this way and that, imagining his reaction. Soon she reminded herself, soon. She told no one about Beau, not Mark. Certainly he wouldn't understand, would probably worry, might even try to interfere. Not the neighbors, who she barely spoke to anyway. Not the ladies at church, who she'd stopped attending services months ago. This was hers and Beau's, a secret garden of connection in the wasteland of her life. But secrets have a way of pressing outward, demanding expression. One Sunday, when Mark called for their weekly 15 minutes, she almost told him, almost said, "I've met someone, Mark, someone who makes me happy." But the words stuck in her throat, and by the time she'd unstuck them, the conversation had moved on to Chloe's promotion. And the puppy's new trick, and wasn't it time to hang up soon? Maybe after he comes, she thought, after it's real, then I'll tell them. For now, she hoarded her happiness like a miser, counting it over and over in the dark hours, making sure it was still there. It grew with each message from Beau, each declaration of longing, each promise of the future they'd share. "What will we do when you're here?" she asked one night. "Everything, nothing, whatever you want. I just want to be with you, Eleanor, in your space, breathing your air, seeing your world through my eyes and through yours. I want to know everything about you, the smell of your shampoo, the way you take your coffee, the sound of your laugh when I say something stupid. You never say anything stupid. Give me time. In person, I'm a mess. You'll see." She smiled at that, imagining him clumsy and real and human. Not the polished romantic of his messages, but an actual man with actual flaws. She wanted that, wanted all of it. "I can't wait," she wrote. "I've been alone so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to look forward to something. You'll never be alone again, baby. Not if I have anything to say about it." She believed him. She believed everything. One night, late, after a particularly tender exchange, Beau wrote something that made her catch her breath. "Eleanor, I need to ask you something. Something important. Anything. When I come there, when we're together, I want it to be real. I want to be with you in every way. You know what I mean?" She knew. Of course she knew. She'd thought about it constantly, the physical reality of their connection, the moment when words became actions, when imagination became flesh. "I know," she wrote. "Is that something you want? Something you're ready for? I don't want to pressure you. You're so precious to me. The last thing I want is to rush you into something you're not ready for." She thought about her body, the wrinkles, the sags, the evidence of 7 decades of living. She thought about the last time she'd been intimate with anyone, years ago with Arthur, when they'd still tried occasionally despite his health issues. She thought about the vulnerability of being seen, truly seen, by someone new. And then, she thought about his words, his promises, his insistence that age was just a number, that beauty didn't fade, that she was precious to him. "I want it," she wrote. "I want you, all of you. Then you'll have me, baby, soon, I promise." She went to sleep that night with her phone clutched to her chest, his words playing on repeat in her mind. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and Eleanor Vance, 74 years old and falling faster than she'd ever fallen, dreamed of a young man with a Cajun heart who was going to change everything. She just didn't know yet that some changes leave scars. She just didn't know yet that she was falling not into love, but into a trap. The first crack. It was a Tuesday afternoon in mid-November when the first crack appeared in Eleanor's perfect world. She had been gardening, or rather, sitting in the garden, watching the orange tomcat pick his way along the fence line when her phone buzzed with a message from Beau. She reached for it eagerly, as she always did, her heart doing that familiar little flip at the sight of his name. But this message was different. "Hey baby, something's come up, bad news. Can you talk?" She stared at the words, a cold finger tracing down her spine. Bad news? What kind of bad news? Was he hurt? Sick? Had something happened to his family back in Louisiana? She typed back with trembling fingers. "Of course, what's wrong?" The three dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. She watched them dance, her anxiety building with each passing second. Finally, his message arrived. "It's the rig. A piece of equipment failed critical safety pump. If it's not fixed, they'll shut us down. I could lose my contract, lose everything." Relief washed through her, followed immediately by guilt at her relief. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't dying. It was just work. Work problems were manageable. "That's terrible," she wrote, "but surely the company will fix it." "That's the problem, baby. Companies dragging their feet. Red tape, approvals, could take weeks, and I can't afford weeks. My contract ends in 2 weeks. If I'm not operational, they'll replace me with someone who is." She tried to understand. The world of oil rigs and contracts was foreign to her, a language she didn't speak. But she understood the bottom line. Beau was in trouble. "What can you do?" she asked. "There's a guy in Huma, a supplier I've used before. He has the part I need, used but in good shape. Could have it here in 2 days if I can get the cash to him. But my money's all tied up, Eleanor. Investments I can't touch from out here. I'm stuck." She read the words, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a tiny alarm bell rang. Faint and easily dismissed, but there. She ignored it. "How much?" She typed. 8,000. "I hate to even ask, baby. I hate it, but you're the only person I trust, the only person who might understand. I'd pay you back the second I'm on shore. Every penny plus interest. I swear on my mama's grave, $8,000. It was a lot more than a lot, but it wasn't everything. She had savings, investments. Arthur had left her. She could spare 8,000 if it meant Beau could keep his job, could come to her as promised. "Let me think about it," she wrote. "Of course, baby. Take all the time you need. I know it's a lot to ask. I don't know what else to do. I'm alone out here, scared, and all I can think about is you, about getting to you, about finally holding you in my arms. This stupid piece of metal is all that's standing between me and that moment." She read that last sentence 3 times, all that's standing between me and that moment. She thought about the floral dress hanging in her closet, the new sheets on her bed, the dreams she'd been dreaming. She opened her banking app, something Beau had taught her to do, and checked her balance. She had more than 8,000 in her checking account. She could do this. She could help him. "I'll send it," she typed before she could second-guess herself. "Tell me where." His response was immediate, effusive, overwhelming. "Eleanor, my God. You're an angel, a literal angel. I don't know how to thank you. I'll pay you back, I promise, every cent, and when I get there, I'm going to spend every single day making you feel as special as you are. I love you so much." She sent the money through an app he directed her to, her fingers moving mechanically while her heart swelled with warmth. She was helping him. She was part of his life, his struggle, his future. This was what love did. It showed up when it mattered. "It's done," she wrote. "I hope it helps. It helps more than you know, baby. The part. We'll be here Thursday. I'll be on schedule. I'll be with you soon. Nothing can stop us now." She smiled at the screen, the tiny alarm bell fading into silence. Everything was fine. Better than fine. Everything was perfect. Thursday came and went. Beau reported that the part had arrived, that the repair was underway, that everything was going according to plan. Eleanor allowed herself to breathe, to relax, to return to the happy anticipation that had filled her days. But Friday brought a new message, a new problem. "Baby, I hate to do this. I hate it." But something else came up. She read the words and felt her stomach clench. "What now?" The helicopter, the one that services the rig, it's grounded mechanical issues. They say it could be weeks before it's fixed. I need to get this part to the platform, Eleanor. If I don't, the repair can't happen. The contract is still on the line. Can't they send another helicopter? Not without payment, private charter, $5,000. I know, baby, I know, it's too much. Forget I asked. I'll figure something else out. She stared at the screen, the tiny alarm bell ringing louder now. $5,000, that was on top of the $13,000 total. It was starting to feel like a lot, but then another message came through. I'm sitting here looking at your photo, the one in the blue dress. You look so happy in it, so peaceful. I keep imagining that look on your face when you see me for the first time. When I walk off that plane and you realize this is real, we're real. I'd give anything to see that look, Eleanor. Anything, but maybe it's not meant to. Maybe the universe is telling us something. She felt panic rise in her chest. He was giving up. He was going to let the obstacles win, and then he'd never come, and she'd never know what could have been, and she'd be alone again, forever alone, with nothing but memories of what almost happened. No, she typed quickly. Don't say that. We'll figure it out. I'll send the money. Eleanor, no, I can't ask you to do that. You've already done so much. You're not asking. I'm offering. Tell me where to send it. She sent the $5,000, and when his effusive thanks came pouring in, she let them wash away her doubts. He loved her. He was grateful. He was coming. That was all that mattered. The requests continued. Over the next week, they came with increasing frequency, each one accompanied by a new crisis, a new emergency, a new reason why Bo needed money to overcome the obstacles between them. A fee for the contractor installing the part under the table, payments to crew members who'd gotten suspicious and needed to be bought off, a customs issue with the part's delivery, a lawyer's retainer because someone was threatening to sue. Each request was smaller than the last 3,000 here, 2,000 there, but they added up. Eleanor watched her bank balance dwindle with a mixture of anxiety and determination. She was in too deep to stop now, too committed, too close to the finish line. Just a few more things, baby, Bo assured her after each transfer. Then, it's smooth sailing, then I'm yours. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him, and so she did. She started dipping into savings she'd promised herself she'd never touch. The certificate of deposit she and Arthur had opened for their 30th anniversary gone. The emergency fund they'd built over decades of careful saving draining fast. She told herself it was an emergency, the biggest emergency of her life. What was money for? If not to secure happiness? Mark called on Sunday, and she barely heard a word he said. She sat with the phone pressed to her ear, making appropriate noises, while her mind calculated how much she'd sent so far. 28,031.35. She'd lost track, really. Didn't want to keep track. Mom? You still there? What? Yes, dear. Sorry, just distracted. Everything okay? Fine. Everything's fine. She hung up and checked her phone for messages from Bo. Nothing yet. He was probably sleeping or dealing with another crisis. She'd hear soon. The final request came on a Wednesday morning. Baby, I'm so sorry. I know you've done so much already, but the lawyer says we need 10,000 more to make this go away. After that, it's over. I'm free. I'm yours. $10,000. Eleanor stared at the number, really stared at it, for the first time allowing herself to calculate the total. 8 plus 5 plus 3 plus 2 plus 7 plus. She did the math in her head, her stomach dropping with each addition. Over $40,000. In less than 2 weeks. Half of everything she had in the world. I can't, she typed, her hands shaking. I just can't. I don't have it. Eleanor, please, I'm so close. We're so close. Don't give up now. I'm not giving up. I just don't have it. I've given you everything I can. There was a long pause, the longest pause yet. She watched the screen, waiting for the 3 dots, her heart pounding. Finally, they appeared. I understand. I do. I'll figure something out. I love you, Eleanor. Never forget that. She stared at the words, relief and guilt washing through her in equal measure. He understood. He wasn't angry. He still loved her. But something felt wrong. She couldn't name it, couldn't articulate it, but the feeling persisted, a nagging sense that she'd missed something important, that the picture she'd been looking at wasn't the whole picture. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through every conversation, every request, every promise, and for the first time, she let herself ask the questions she'd been avoiding. Why did everything cost money? Why were there so many emergencies? Why couldn't the company handle any of this? Why was she, a 74-year-old widow in Phoenix, the only person who could help? She didn't have answers, but she had a new feeling, one she hadn't allowed herself before, doubt. The next morning, Eleanor opened her laptop and typed words she'd never typed before, romance scammer signs. The search results were overwhelming, article after article, warning after warning, story after story of women just like her who'd been duped by men just like Bo. offshore workers, emergency situations, requests for money, promises of love. And then, when the money stopped, silence. She read for hours, her blood growing colder with each page. The patterns were identical. The language was identical. The photos she scrolled through, image after image of handsome men in hard hats, men who looked just like Bo, men who didn't exist. She pulled up his photos and did a reverse image search. It took her to a dozen different websites, social media profiles, stock photo sites, articles about how to spot a fake profile. His face was everywhere and nowhere. It belonged to everyone and no one. He wasn't real. None of it was real. The room spun. Eleanor gripped the edge of the desk, her vision tunneling, her breath coming in short gasps. $40,000, $40,000, and her heart, her hope, her carefully reconstructed dreams all given to a phantom. A collection of stolen images and well-rehearsed lines, sitting in an internet. Somewhere on the other side of the world, she picked up her phone with shaking hands and opened the messaging app. Bo, I've been reading about scammers online, people who pretend to be in love just to get money. You're asking for more and more, and it's making me scared. I can't send you any more money. I'm terrified. Please, just tell me the truth. She sent it and waited. An hour passed, 2, 3. She sent another. Bo, please, just talk to me. Nothing. She tried to call. The app rang and rang, then went to voicemail, a generic, automated voice she'd never heard before. She tried again and again and again. The dots never appeared. The messages stayed undelivered, never read. She sat in Arthur's armchair, clutching her phone, watching the screen dim and brighten as it went to sleep, and she woke it over and over. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and Eleanor Vance, 74 years old and half a fortune poorer, waited for a ghost to speak. He never did. The sinking sands the week that followed was the longest of Eleanor's life. She barely moved from Arthur's armchair. Meals went uneaten, tea grew cold in its cup, the television remained dark and silent. She sat with her phone in her lap, checking it every few minutes, willing it to buzz with a message from Bo. Any message, an explanation, an apology, even an angry accusation, anything would be better than this deafening silence, but the silence continued. On the third day, she finally forced herself to eat something, a piece of toast, dry and tasteless, that she chewed mechanically while staring out the kitchen window at the garden. The weeds had grown taller. Soon they would overtake everything, erase the last traces of Arthur's careful cultivation. It seemed fitting somehow. Everything was being erased. She thought about calling Mark. The impulse rose in her chest several times a day, a desperate urge to tell someone, to confess, to unload the crushing weight of her shame. But each time she stopped herself. What would she say? Hello, son. I've been having an online romance with a 37-year-old oil rig worker, and I've sent him half your father's life savings. The words were absurd, humiliating. She couldn't speak them aloud, so she sat alone with her shame, letting it grow. On the fifth day, she finally opened the messaging app again. Bo's account was still there, still visible, but her last messages remained undelivered. He was ignoring her. Or maybe he couldn't respond, maybe something had happened to him, maybe he was hurt, maybe she stopped herself. She knew intellectually what had happened. The articles had made it clear, but her heart hadn't caught up to her head yet. Her heart still hoped. She typed one last message. Bo, if you're real, please just tell me. I need to understand. She pressed send and waited. An hour later, she checked again. The message was still undelivered. She closed the app, opened it, closed it again. The compulsion was physical, like an itch she couldn't stop scratching. On the sixth day, she opened the app and found a red notification where Bo's name used to be. User not found. She clicked on his profile. Gone. Every message, every photo, every promise deleted, vanished as if he had never existed. She sat very still for a long moment. Then she closed the app, opened it again. The same red notification, closed it, opened it, again and again, as if repetition could change reality. It couldn't. He was gone. The tears came then, not the quiet, dignified tears she'd shed at Arthur's funeral, but ugly, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for the money, yes, but more than that, she cried for the dreams, the floral dress hanging unworn in her closet, the new sheets on her bed, the future she'd constructed so carefully, brick by brick, out of his beautiful lies. She cried until she had nothing left, and then she sat in the dark, empty and still. The days blurred together after that. Eleanor stopped checking the time, stopped marking the passage of days. She slept in Arthur's chair, woke in Arthur's chair, ate only when the growling of her stomach became impossible to ignore. The world outside. Her windows continued, neighbors came and went, seasons shifted, life went on, but inside the bungalow, time had stopped. She thought about the money constantly, $40,000. She'd done the math a dozen times, hoping each time that she'd made a mistake, that the total was smaller than she remembered. It never was. $40,327, half of everything she and Arthur had saved over 52 years of marriage. The certificate of deposit was gone. The emergency fund was decimated. Her checking account hovered just above zero. She would have to cancel her credit card, sell something maybe, figure out how to survive on her Social Security and the small pension Arthur had left. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what it represented: her stupidity, her desperation, her pathetic hunger for attention from a man young enough to be her grandson. She had wanted to believe so badly that she'd ignored every warning sign, every red flag, every instinct that had tried to protect her. "Fool," she whispered to herself in the dark hours. "Old, stupid fool." On the 10th day, there was a knock at the door. Eleanor didn't move. She hadn't answered the door in weeks, had barely acknowledged the world outside her bungalow. The mail piled up in its box. The phone rang occasionally, but she let it go to voicemail. Mark had left several messages, his voice growing more concerned with each one, but she couldn't bring herself to call back. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Mrs. Vance?" "Eleanor?" "It's Carol from next door. You haven't picked up your mail in a while. Just wanted to check on you." Carol, the neighbor on the left, a widow herself, a few years younger than Eleanor. They'd exchanged pleasantries over the years, but never more. Now Carol was at her door, concerned enough to knock. Eleanor considered staying silent, pretending she wasn't home, but her car was in the driveway. Carol would know she was here. And somewhere, buried under the weight of her shame, a small voice whispered that maybe she shouldn't be alone anymore. She forced herself out of the chair, her joints screaming in protest. She hadn't moved properly in days, and her body was letting her know. She shuffled to the door, unlocked it, and opened it a crack. Carol stood on the porch, a thin woman in her 60s with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was holding a casserole dish. "I made too much lasagna," she said. "Thought you might like some. And well, I hadn't seen you out and about for a while." Eleanor stared at her. Lasagna. Someone was bringing her lasagna, just like after Arthur died. The symmetry of it almost made her laugh, a bitter, hollow laugh that never quite emerged. "Thank you," she managed. Her voice came out as a croak. When had she last spoken aloud? Carol's eyes widened slightly as she took in Eleanor's appearance, the unwashed hair, the wrinkled clothes, the hollow cheeks. But she didn't comment, didn't ask questions. She just held out the casserole dish. "Why don't I bring this inside for you?" Carol said gently, "and maybe make you a cup of tea." Eleanor wanted to refuse, wanted to take the lasagna and close the door and return to her chair and her silence. But something in Carol's voice, the kindness, the lack of judgment, made her step back instead. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Carol stayed for 2 hours. She made tea, found crackers in the cupboard, sat across from Eleanor at the small kitchen table and talked about nothing important: the weather, the neighborhood gossip, her own late husband and how she'd coped after he passed. She didn't ask why Eleanor looked like she'd been living in her clothes for a week. She didn't pry or push. She just stayed, filling the silence with her gentle presence. Eleanor said almost nothing. She sat with her tea growing cold in front of her, watching Carol move around her kitchen with easy familiarity, as if she'd been here 100 times before. It felt strange to have another person in her space, strange and uncomfortable and, against all odds, slightly comforting. Before she left, Carol touched Eleanor's shoulder. "I'm just next door," she said. "If you need anything, and I mean anything, that's what neighbors are for." Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. Carol let herself out, and the bungalow fell silent again. But the silence felt different now, less absolute. A door had been opened, just a crack, and through it came the faint possibility that Eleanor might not have to face this alone. The next day, Eleanor showered for the first time in a week. She stood under the hot water for a long time, letting it wash away the physical evidence of her despair. Her body felt foreign to her, thinner than she remembered, the bones more prominent under her skin. She'd lost weight without noticing. Grief and shame, it seemed, were effective diets. She dressed in clean clothes, made herself a proper breakfast, sat at the kitchen table and ate it like a normal person. Then she walked to the front door, opened it and retrieved her mail. Bills, catalogs, a handwritten envelope that made her pause. The return address was local, the handwriting unfamiliar. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Carol's neat cursive: Eleanor. "I don't know what's happened, and I'm not going to ask, but I've been where you are, the dark place where it's hard to see a way out. What helped me was having someone to talk to who wouldn't judge. If you ever want that, my door is open. No questions, no expectations, just company. Come over for coffee sometime, or don't, either way. I'm here. Your neighbor." Carol. Eleanor read the note 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it on the kitchen counter, next to the phone that no longer brought her joy. She didn't go to Carol's that day or the next, but she kept the note, and sometimes in the darkest hours, she would read it again and remember that someone out there had offered her a lifeline. On the 15th day, Eleanor finally called Mark. He answered on the second ring, his voice tight with worry. "Mom? I've been calling for weeks. Are you okay?" She opened her mouth to tell him to confess everything, to unburden herself of the terrible weight she'd been carrying. But the words wouldn't come. They stuck in her throat, too shameful to utter. "I'm fine," she said. Just been tired. You sound tired. Are you eating? Sleeping?" Yes, I'm fine. Don't worry about me." There was a pause on the other end. She could hear him weighing his words, deciding whether to push. "Mom, I could come down for a visit, take some time off work." Chloe said she'd be fine with it. "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "No, don't do that. You're busy." "I'm fine, really." Another pause. "If you're sure, I'm sure." They talked for a few more minutes about the weather, about the puppy, about nothing at all, and then they hung up. Eleanor set the phone down and stared at it, feeling the weight of her lie pressing down on her chest. She'd had a chance to tell him to let someone in, and she'd chosen instead to protect herself from the shame of confession. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and Eleanor sat alone with her secret, watching it grow heavier by the day. The money troubles began in earnest at the end of November. Her bank called to inform her that her checking account was overdrawn. She'd forgotten about the automatic payments, the utilities, the insurance, the small monthly donations to the church she no longer attended. Without her savings to cover them, they'd bounced, and now there were fees, and a growing mountain of red ink. She spent an entire afternoon on the phone, canceling what she could, deferring what she couldn't. Her credit card was maxed out from the purchases she'd made in anticipation of Beau's visit, the dress, the sheets, the nightgown, all of it mocking her now from her closet. She would have to sell something, the jewelry Arthur had given her over the years, maybe that, or the car, though then she'd be trapped in the house completely. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she'd done. $40,000 wasn't just a number. It was security. It was peace of mind. It was the difference between a comfortable old age and a precarious one, and she'd given it to a ghost. That night she dreamed of Beau. In the dream he was real flesh and blood and standing in her kitchen, making coffee like he belonged there. She could smell him, something warm and masculine, could see the crinkles around his eyes when he smiled. He turned to her and opened his mouth to speak, and she leaned forward eagerly to hear his voice. But when he spoke, it wasn't words that came out. It was money. $100 bills pouring from his mouth in an endless stream, filling the kitchen, rising around them, burying her. She woke gasping, her heart pounding, the image seared into her mind. Money pouring from the mouth of the man she'd loved. Money he'd taken from her. Money she'd never see again. She sat in the dark, waiting for morning, and for the first time since Beau had vanished, she let herself feel something other than shame. She let herself feel anger. December arrived, bringing with it the first real cold of the season. Eleanor bundled up and sat in the garden one afternoon, watching the orange tomcat patrol his territory. He'd grown bolder over the weeks, sometimes venturing onto the patio, even accepting the occasional offering of tuna from her hand. She'd named him Arthur, after the only other creature who'd ever made her feel less alone. "Hey, Arthur," she whispered, and the cat flicked an ear in acknowledgement. "I made a terrible mistake." The cat continued his patrol, uninterested in her confession, but speaking the words aloud, even to a cat, felt like something. A small crack in the dam of silence she'd built around herself. "I fell in love with a lie," she continued, "and now I don't know who I am anymore." The cat paused, looked at her with his yellow eyes, and then resumed his patrol. Eleanor watched him go, feeling the cold seep through her coat. She didn't know who she was anymore. That was the truth of it. For 4 years she'd been Arthur's widow. Then briefly she'd been Beau's beloved. Now she was neither, just an old woman alone in a too-quiet house, with nothing to show for her life but memories and regret. The refrigerator hummed through the open kitchen window. The clock ticked somewhere inside, and Eleanor sat in the cold December sun, trying to remember how to be herself again. She wasn't sure she remembered how. A crack of light. December brought more than cold to Phoenix. It brought the holidays, those relentless, joy-demanding weeks that Eleanor had learned to dread since Arthur's death. Store windows filled with twinkling lights, commercials sang of family and togetherness, and everywhere she looked, there were reminders of everything she'd lost. This year, the reminders felt sharper, crueler. Last Christmas, she'd been merely lonely, a widow going through the motions, putting up a small tree because that's what you did, sending cards because it was expected. This year, she was lonely and humiliated and $40,000 poorer. The combination was almost more than she could bear. She'd stopped checking her bank statements. What was the point? The money was gone, the damage was done. All she could do now was try to survive on what remained. But survival, she was learning, required more than just food and shelter. It required a reason to keep going, and that she couldn't find. The first Sunday in December, there was another knock at the door. Eleanor considered ignoring it. She'd become good at ignoring things: the phone, the mail, the increasingly concerned messages from Mark. But something made her get up from Arthur's chair and shuffle to the door. Carol stood on the porch, bundled in a puffy coat, holding two steaming mugs. "Peppermint mocha," she said, holding one out. "My secret recipe. Figured you might need one." Eleanor stared at the mug. The smell of chocolate and peppermint wafted toward her, warm and inviting. When had anyone last brought her something just because? She didn't know what to say. "You don't have to talk," Carol said gently. "You don't have to do anything. Just take the coffee and go back inside if you want. But I thought you might like some company. No pressure either way." Eleanor looked at Carol's face, kind, unjudging, patient, and felt something shift inside her. A tiny loosening of the knot that had been tightening in her chest for weeks. "Thank you," she whispered. She took the mug and stepped back from the door. Would you like to come in?" Carol's smile was warm. "I'd love to." They sat in the living room, Eleanor in Arthur's chair, Carol on the edge of the couch. The peppermint mocha was delicious, rich and sweet, and exactly what Eleanor hadn't known she needed. "I used to make these for my husband," Carol said, cradling her own mug every Christmas morning. "It was our tradition. After he passed, I couldn't make them for a while, too painful. But then I realized making them made me feel close to him again. So now I make them for myself, and sometimes for neighbors who look like they need one." Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. "You don't have to tell me anything," Carol continued, "but I want you to know whatever it is, you're not alone in it. I've been through some things myself, things I never thought I'd survive, and the only thing that got me through was knowing I didn't have to carry them by myself." Eleanor looked down at her mug, watching the swirl of chocolate and cream. The words pressed against her throat, demanding release. She'd been holding them in for so long, the confession, the shame, the terrible weight of what she'd done. "I did something stupid," she whispered. Carol didn't respond, didn't push. She just waited, her presence a quiet invitation. "I met a man, online." The words came out haltingly, each one an effort. He seemed wonderful, kind, romantic. He said he loved me. He said he was going to come here, to be with me." She paused, waiting for judgment that didn't come. Carol's face remained soft, attentive. "I sent him money when he had problems, emergencies," he said. "Just until his contract ended," he said. "He'd pay me back." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I sent him $40,000, half of everything I had, and then he disappeared, blocked me, vanished, like I never existed." There, she'd said it. The words hung in the air between them, ugly and shameful and true. Carol was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. "Oh, Eleanor, that's not stupid, that's human." Eleanor looked up, confused. "What?" "Someone told you what you needed to hear, made you feel seen, wanted, loved. That's not stupid, that's desperate. And desperate is just another word for lonely." Carol reached over and touched her hand. "I almost fell for something similar a few years after my husband died. A man from a dating site, very charming, very attentive. He asked for money to come visit me. I almost sent it. The only thing that stopped me was a friend who'd been through it herself." Eleanor stared at her. "You understand?" "More than you know. These people, they're professionals, Eleanor. They know exactly what to say, how to say it, when to say it. They prey on loneliness because loneliness is the most desperate hunger there is." Carol squeezed her hand. "You're not the first person this has happened to, and you won't be the last, but you are the first person I've met who had the courage to tell someone about it. That takes strength." Eleanor hadn't felt strong in weeks. She'd felt weak, foolish, pathetic. But Carol was looking at her like she was none of those things, like she was just human. "I don't know what to do," Eleanor admitted. "The money's gone. I can't get it back. I can't even tell my son. He'll think I've lost my mind. Maybe he would, or maybe he'd surprise you." Carol shrugged. "But you don't have to decide that today. Today you just have to get through. And tomorrow you'll get through that too. One day at a time. That's how we survive." They sat together as the afternoon light faded, two widows in a quiet living room, sharing coffee and the weight of things too heavy to carry alone. When Carol finally left, she paused at the door. "I'm here every day," she said. "Morning coffee, afternoon tea, evening wine, whatever you need. And Eleanor, you're going to be okay. It doesn't feel like it now, but you will be." After she was gone, Eleanor sat in Arthur's chair and let herself feel something she hadn't felt in weeks, the faintest glimmer of hope. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a strange sensation, not quite purpose, but something adjacent to it. She got up, showered, dressed in actual clothes instead of the sweatpants she'd been living in. She made herself breakfast and ate it at the kitchen table, looking out at the garden. The weeds were still there, but for the first time, she noticed that they weren't the only things growing. Beneath the chaos, she could see the faint outlines of Arthur's roses, not blooming, not even leafing, but still there, still alive under all the neglect. Maybe she was like that too, still alive under everything. She pulled out her laptop, the same laptop where she'd first encountered Beau, where she'd fallen for his lies, and opened a search engine. This time she typed different words: support for romance scam victims. The results surprised her. There were forums, hotlines, support groups, stories from women all over the country, all over the world, who'd been through exactly what she had. Some had lost more hundreds of thousands, their homes, their retirement. Some had lost less, but all of them shared the same shame, the same confusion, the same struggle to understand how they'd been so thoroughly deceived. She read for hours, and with each story, the weight on her chest lightened just a little. She wasn't alone. She'd never been alone. There were thousands of Eleanors out there, all trying to piece their lives back together. On a whim, she joined a forum, created a username Desert Rose 47, the same one she'd used on Silver Soulmates. Posted a short message: I was scammed out of $40,000 by someone I met online. He pretended to love me. I feel so stupid. How do you move on from this? Within an hour, there were responses, dozens of them. Women offering comfort, advice, their own stories. One wrote, "You're not stupid, you're human. These people are professionals at manipulation." Another, "It took me 2 years to tell anyone. You're already braver than I was." Another, "The shame is the worst part, but you didn't ask for this. You didn't deserve this." Eleanor read each response, tears streaming down her face. Strangers, women she'd never meet, were reaching across the digital void to hold her up. The same digital void that had nearly destroyed her was now offering a lifeline. She typed a reply: "Thank you. I didn't know how much I needed to hear that." Over the next week, Eleanor found a new rhythm. Mornings with Carol, coffee and conversation that slowly, gently coaxed her back toward the land of the living. Afternoons on the forum, reading and occasionally posting, building connections with women who understood. Evenings with the orange tomcat Arthur, who had taken to sitting on the patio every night, waiting for his tuna. She didn't tell Mark, not yet, but she stopped avoiding his calls, and when they talked, she found herself able to listen, to ask questions, to be present in a way she hadn't been in months. He mentioned coming for Christmas, and this time she didn't immediately discourage him. "Maybe that would be nice," she said, and heard the surprise in his voice. "Really? You'd want that?" "Really, I'd like to see you." After they hung up, she sat for a long time, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake. Christmas with Mark meant Christmas with questions, with observations, with the risk that he'd see through her carefully constructed normalcy. But it also meant Christmas with family, with someone who loved her, however imperfectly, maybe. That was worth the risk. One afternoon, Carol arrived with more than coffee. She carried a small bag and a determined expression. "I'm taking you somewhere," she announced. Eleanor blinked. "Where?" "It's a surprise. Put on a coat. We're going out." Eleanor hadn't left the house in weeks, not since before Beau, not since she'd been living in the bright anticipation of his arrival. The thought of stepping outside, of facing the world, made her stomach clench. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "Yes, you can." Carol's voice was gentle but firm. "One step at a time. I'll be right there with you." Somehow, Eleanor found herself putting on her coat, walking to Carol's car, getting in. The world outside was bright and cold and overwhelming. She gripped the door handle and focused on breathing. Carol drove to a small community center on the other of town. Inside, a group of women sat in a circle, coffee cups in hand, talking quietly. Some were Eleanor's age, some were younger. All of them had a look she recognized, the hollowed-out look of someone who'd been through something. "This is a support group," Carol said quietly. "For women who've been scammed. I found it after my almost experience. I've been coming for 2 years. You don't have to talk, you don't have to stay, but I thought you might want to see that you're not alone." Eleanor stood in the doorway, frozen. Every instinct told her to run, to hide, to retreat to the safety of her bungalow and her silence. But Carol's hand on her arm was steady, grounding. "I'll be right beside you," Carol said. "Whatever you decide." Eleanor looked at the circle of women, strangers who shared her shame, her pain, her struggle. One of them looked up and smiled, a warm, welcoming smile that held no judgment. Eleanor took a breath, then another. And then, step by step, she walked into the room. That night, Eleanor sat in Arthur's chair and let herself feel something new. Pride. Small, tentative, easily crushed, but pride nonetheless. She'd left the house. She'd met other survivors. She'd spoken just a little about what had happened to her, and no one had laughed. No one had judged. No one had called her stupid. The women in the circle had nodded, murmured understanding, shared their own stories. One woman had lost her house. Another had lost her marriage when her husband found out. A third had lost over $200,000 and was still paying off the debt. Compared to them, Eleanor's 40,000 seemed almost manageable, almost. She thought about what one woman had said. The shame is the scammer's real weapon. They take your money, but they also take your trust in yourself. Getting that back is harder than earning the money. Getting back her trust in herself. Could she do that? Could she ever look in the mirror and see someone wise, someone capable, someone worth loving? She didn't know, but for the first time, she wanted to try. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and Eleanor Vance, 74 years old and slowly climbing out of the deepest hole of her life, made a decision. Tomorrow, she would start fighting back. She just didn't know yet what that would mean. The last message. December stretched onward, each day a small victory or a small defeat. Eleanor learned to measure her progress not in grand gestures but in tiny moments: a shower taken, a meal cooked, a walk to the end of the driveway and back. The support group met every Wednesday, and she went without fail, sitting in the circle of women who understood, drawing strength from their shared survival. But the wound was still fresh, and some days it bled. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks before Christmas. Eleanor was cleaning out her closet, a task Carol had suggested, something about clearing physical space to make room for emotional healing. She'd been doing well, sorting through years of accumulated clothes, setting aside things to donate. Then she opened the back corner and found it, the floral dress, still in its catalog packaging. Never worn, the tag still attached, the blue fabric as bright and hopeful as the day she'd ordered it, imagining Beau's reaction when he saw her in it. She sat on the edge of the bed, the dress in her lap, and the memories came flooding back. The anticipation, the planning, the absolute certainty that her life was about to change, that love was finally coming for her after 4 long years of loneliness, and then the requests, the money, the slow, creeping realization that something was wrong, the final, crushing confirmation when his account vanished. She'd been so sure, so completely, utterly sure that he was real. Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and angry. She wasn't just crying for the money now, or even for the lost dream. She was crying for the person she'd been, the desperate, lonely woman who'd been so hungry for affection that she'd ignored every warning sign. That woman deserved compassion, she knew. The support group had taught her that, but she also deserved to grieve. She held the dress for a long time, remembering. Then slowly she stood up, carried it to the kitchen, and dropped it in the trash can. She stood over it for a moment, her hand hovering. Then she closed the lid and walked away. That night she dreamed of Beau again. But this time the dream was different. He was standing in her kitchen just like before, but now she could see him clearly, really see him. Not the handsome rig engineer from the photos, but a shadowy figure, featureless and shifting. He opened his mouth to speak, and instead of money, instead of lies, nothing came out. Just silence. Empty, echoing silence. She woke with the word "why" on her lips. Why had he chosen her? Why had he pretended to love her? Why had he taken everything and left nothing but shame? The questions had no answers. She knew that the support group leader, a woman named Diane who'd been scammed out of her retirement fund, had explained it clearly. They don't see you as a person. You're a target, a mark. The love isn't real because you're not real to them. You're just a wallet with a heartbeat. A wallet with a heartbeat. The phrase had made Eleanor flinch when she first heard it. It still made her flinch, but it was also freeing in a strange way. Beau's betrayal wasn't about her, not really. It was about his greed, his manipulation, his choice to destroy people for profit. She'd been a victim, not a fool. Knowing that and feeling it were two different things. The next morning, Eleanor did something she'd been avoiding for weeks. She opened her laptop, went to the messaging app where Beau had lived, and looked at their last exchange. There it was, preserved in digital amber. Her final message: "Beau, if you're real, please just tell me. I need to understand." And beneath it, the red notification: "User not found." She'd looked at this screen 100 times since he vanished, each time feeling the fresh sting of abandonment. But today she looked at it differently. Today she wasn't looking for him to come back. She was looking for closure. She scrolled up, reading their early messages, the flirtation, the connection, the beautiful lies he'd woven so carefully. She could see it now, the patterns she'd missed, the way he'd mirrored her loneliness, the way he'd validated her feelings, the way he'd slowly, carefully built her trust before exploiting it. It was like reading a map of a crime she hadn't known she was walking into. When she reached the end, she sat back and took a deep breath. Then she typed one final message, knowing it would never be delivered, knowing he would never see it. "I don't know your real name. I don't know where you are or who you really are. But I want you to know something. You didn't break me. You hurt me. You took my money and my trust and my hope. But I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I will not let you win." She stared at the words for a long moment. Then she deleted the app from her phone. The support group that Wednesday was different. Eleanor arrived early, helped set up the chairs, made the coffee. When it was her turn to speak, she didn't talk about her pain or her shame. She talked about the dress in the trash, the deleted app, the message he'd never see. "I'm done letting him live in my head," she said, her voice steady. "He took enough from me. He doesn't get to take my peace too." The women nodded, some smiling, some wiping tears. Diane reached over and squeezed her hand. "That's how it starts," she said, "taking back your power, one small piece at a time." After the meeting, a woman Eleanor didn't know well approached her. She was younger, maybe 50, with tired eyes and a hesitant smile. "I heard you say you lost 40,000, the woman said quietly. "I lost 60, 2 years ago. I still haven't told my kids. They think I'm just bad with money." Eleanor looked at her, really looked, and saw herself reflected in those tired eyes. The same shame, the same fear, the same desperate need for someone to understand. "I haven't told my son either," Eleanor admitted. "I don't know how." The woman nodded. "Me neither. But maybe we could practice together? On each other? Before we do it for real?" Eleanor felt something warm bloom in her chest. Connection, real connection, not the manufactured intimacy of a scammer's lies, but genuine human reaching toward human. "I'd like that," she said. "My name's Eleanor. Susan." The woman's smile widened, reaching her eyes for the first time. "Nice to meet you, Eleanor." They sat together after the others left, two women bound by a pain no one should have to carry alone, and they talked about their families, their lives before, their struggles since, about the complicated tangle of emotions that came with being a victim, the shame, the anger, the grief, the stubborn determination to survive. When Eleanor finally left, she felt lighter than she had in months. She still had a long way to go, but she wasn't walking alone anymore. That night, Mark called. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone that meant he'd been discussing something with Chloe. "Christmas. I know I said maybe, but I want to commit. I want to come. Is that okay?" Eleanor hesitated. 2 weeks. Mark would be here in 2 weeks, in her space, asking questions, seeing her life. Could she keep up the pretense for that long? Could she hide the evidence of her destruction? But then she thought about Susan, about practicing how to tell the truth. She thought about the support group, about Diane's words on taking back power. She thought about the floral dress in the trash and the deleted app on her phone. "Mark," she said slowly, "before you come, there's something I need to tell you." She heard him draw a sharp breath on the other end. "What is it? Are you sick? Is something wrong?" "No, I'm not sick, but something happened. Something I've been too ashamed to tell you." She gripped the phone tightly, her heart pounding. "I made a terrible mistake. I was scammed, Mark, online, by someone I thought I loved." Silence. Long, terrible silence. "Mom," he finally said, his voice strange. "What do you mean, scammed?" She told him. Not everything, not the intimate details, not the full extent of the humiliation, but the facts. The man she'd met, the promises he'd made, the money she'd sent, the $40,000, the vanishing. When she finished, she waited for the judgment, the anger, the "I told you so" that never came. $40,000, Mark said quietly. "That's, Mom, that's half of what Dad left you. I know. Where is he now?" "The guy?" "Gone, blocked me, disappeared." Another long silence. Eleanor braced herself. "Mom, I'm so sorry." His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry that happened to you. You didn't deserve that." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Not the hot, angry tears of shame, but something softer. Relief. You're not mad." "Mad? At you?" "No, at whoever did this to you." "Yeah, I'm furious, but not at you. Mom, you're the kindest person I know. Of course someone took advantage of that." He paused. "I should have been there more. I should have called more, visited more. Maybe if I had no." Eleanor cut him off firmly. "This is not your fault. It's mine and his, not yours. But if I'd been a better son, you're a wonderful son. You have your own life, your own family. That's how it should be." She took a shaky breath. I didn't want to hide it from you anymore. I've been so ashamed." "Don't be ashamed. Please don't be ashamed." His voice was thick. "I'm coming down there. Not just for Christmas, I'm coming this weekend. We're going to figure this out together. You don't have to. I want to. I need to. Let me be your son, Mom, please." Eleanor closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. For so long, she'd thought being a good mother meant not burdening him, not asking for help, not admitting weakness. But maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe letting him help was its own kind of gift. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Mark arrived on Saturday, 3 days after their phone call. Eleanor watched him pull into the driveway from the living room window, her heart a chaotic mix of terror and hope. He got out of the rental car, looked at the house, her house, his childhood home, and for a moment, he was the little boy she remembered, the one who'd scraped his knees in this very driveway. Then he saw her in the window and waved, and he was a man again, her son, coming to help. She met him at the door. He hugged her, really hugged her, the kind of hug she hadn't gotten from him in years, tight and long and full of feeling. "I'm here," he said into her hair. "I've got you." They sat in the living room, Eleanor in Arthur's chair, Mark on the couch where Carol always sat. He asked questions, gentle ones, and she answered as honestly as she could, about the loneliness, about Beau's words, his attention, his promises, about the money, each request, the slow realization that something was wrong. When she finished, Mark was quiet for a long moment. "I read about these scams," he finally said. "After you told me, I did some research. They're sophisticated, Mom. These people are professionals. They know exactly what to say, how to build trust, when to ask for money. It's not your fault. That's what the support group says." Support group. She told him about Carol, about the Wednesday meetings, about Susan and Diane and the circle of women who understood. His face softened as she spoke. "You're amazing, you know that?" He said. "You went through something horrible, and instead of hiding forever, you found help. You're fighting back." "I didn't feel like I was fighting. I felt like I was barely surviving. Sometimes that's the same thing." He reached over and took her hand. "Now, let's talk about what we need to do. Financially, I can help." They spent the afternoon going through her accounts, her bills, her options. Mark was calm, methodical, nothing like the distracted man who usually called on Sundays. He was present, focused, entirely hers. When they finished, they'd created a plan: cut expenses, sell the car she didn't really need it anyway, look into senior benefits she hadn't known existed. Mark would help with some things quietly, without making her feel like a charity case. "I can pay you back," she said. "Eventually, Mom." He looked at her with those eyes. Arthur's eyes. "You raised me, you fed me, clothed me, loved me for 18 years. You don't owe me anything, ever." She cried then, finally, fully all the tears she'd been holding back for weeks. Mark held her, let her cry, didn't try to fix it or stop it. He just held on. That night, for the first time in months, Eleanor slept without dreaming of Beau. The next morning, Mark made breakfast, something he hadn't done since he was a teenager: pancakes. Slightly burned on one side, just like old times. They ate at the kitchen table, looking out at the garden. "You should let me help with that," Mark said, nodding at the weeds. "Before I go back, we could clean it up together." Eleanor looked at the chaos, the dead roses, the grasping weeds, the evidence of 4 years of neglect. It seemed insurmountable, but so had everything else, and she'd survived. "I'd like that," she said. They worked all afternoon, side by side, pulling weeds and trimming dead canes and uncovering the bones of Arthur's garden. It was hard work, physical in a way Eleanor hadn't been in years, but it was also healing. Each weed pulled felt like a small victory. Each cleared patch felt like possibility. When they finished, the garden wasn't restored. It would take months, maybe years, to bring it back. But it was no longer a wilderness. It was a place where things could grow again. Mark stood beside her, surveying their work. "Looks better." "It does. You know what Dad would say?" "What?" He grinned. He'd say, "Not bad for a couple of amateurs," and then he'd probably point out everything we did wrong. Eleanor laughed, a real laugh, the first in longer than she could remember. That's exactly what he'd say. They stood together in the fading December light, mother and son, surrounded by the ghosts of roses and the promise of spring. And for the first time in 4 years, Eleanor felt like she might be okay. The refrigerator hummed inside the house, the clock ticked, but Eleanor wasn't listening anymore. She was too busy living, the vanishing. A week passed. Eleanor checked the app obsessively, sometimes 20 times an hour. She composed dozens of unsent messages in her head, pleading, angry, confused, heartbroken. She rehearsed what she would say if he finally responded, how she would demand answers, how she would make him explain. On the 7th day, she tried one last time. She typed a simple message: "Beau, if you're real, please just tell me. I need to understand." She pressed send. Her message was met with a stark red notification: "User not found." She clicked on his profile. Gone. The photo of the handsome man against the ocean deleted. The long, beautiful messages that had filled her days vanished. Their entire history erased as if it had never existed. He had blocked her, deleted the account, evaporated into the digital ether from which he'd appeared. She sat for a long time, staring at the blank screen. Then she closed the app. She opened it again, hoping somehow it had been a mistake. The same red notification. She closed it again, put the phone down, picked it up, checked again, over and over, as if repetition could change reality. It couldn't. He was gone. The humming returns. The silence in the house returned, but it was different now. It wasn't just empty. It was accusatory. It was filled with the echoes of her own foolishness, her desperate, aching loneliness that had made her so vulnerable. Every tick of the grandfather clock felt like a judgment. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a whisper: "Fool, fool, fool." She sat in Arthur's old armchair, the one that still held a faint scent of him, sawdust and old spice, and the particular warmth of a body no longer there. She stared at the wall. The $40,000 was gone. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was the death of the dream of being seen, being wanted, being loved. Again, the dream of Beau, of beignets in New Orleans, of a hand to hold in the evening, of someone who thought her eyes were kind. That loss was a second bereavement, a fresh wound on top of an old scar. She had traded half her savings for a few weeks of feeling alive, and now she was left with nothing but a deeper, more profound loneliness than she had ever known, and the shattering realization that the most intimate connection she'd felt in years had been a lie. Outside, the Arizona sun blazed indifferently. The weeds in Arthur's garden swayed in the dry wind, and the refrigerator hummed on, the loudest sound in the world. Thank you for watching. If this story has touched you, moved you, or opened your eyes to the dangers of online romance scams, please take a moment to share it with the people you love. Share this story your mother, your grandmother, your aunt, your friend who just lost her husband and seems a little too quiet these days, the neighbor who spends too much time on her computer and lights up when you ask about her special friend online. Share this story with them. It could save them from heartbreak. It could save their life savings. It could save their dignity, their peace of mind, their will to trust again.